it's Chris Fleming. Welcome back to this month's edition of Spirit Talk. Our guest this month is an award-winning broadcast journalist based in Chicago. She won an Emmy for her on-camera reporting for CBS and has also worked for ABC, NBC, WGN, and WLS radio. Now, she has a passion for adding humor to life's tragedies through her writing. She's written 4 books, including I'm Spiritual, Dammit, which became a podcast she hosts on WGN-Plus. Please welcome to the show, Jenniffer Weigel. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to thank you. You had sent this book to me, Psychics, Healers, and Mediums, a journalist, a road trip, and voices from the other side. And that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast.
Sounds good to me.
First question I have, Jen, is how did you come up with this idea to write this book? I took a look at your past, and I see that you've written books about spiritual, about psychics, and also you wrote a book, Stay Tuned, Conversations with Dad from the Other Side.
Correct.
Did all that lead up to this book?
Exactly. It's, my other 3 books are more memoir-based, and it's my journey of questing and wondering what it all means and what happens when we die. I lost my dad to a brain tumor at the age of 56, so I was questing and curious and sad and anxious and all of those things that you feel when you're going through grief. And so I started doing interviews with these people who claim to have these gifts so that I could kind of weed through the information for myself. And then I thought at first, to be quite honest, Chris, I thought I was going to be compiling a sort of handbook, if you will, for people who were grieving so they wouldn't get taken to the cleaners by these people who claim to do all these things. And then I found myself scratching my head more often than not. And there were so many encounters that I just couldn't explain simply, right? I mean, a journalist wants their sources to be something that they could call on a landline and, call it a day. But a lot of the metaphysical world cannot be proven in simple terms. So I kept on doing the interviews. And with this latest book, it's really been, I thought, I want to put in a lot of these people who are sort of popular in this space, right? Mm-hmm. Bestsellers, if you will, or more well-known, and then go and sort of, I don't want to say test their gifts, but kind of test their gifts and bring with me a stranger to them, a friend of mine, but I wouldn't tell them who. So then they could decide from the content, they could do a reading. You can Google me all day long, but you can't Google an unknown person. Right. So I wanted to add that level of, certainty and uncertainty for each encounter, which I think was good for both the person that came along and for the reader, so that they could know that this was not a setup. And that's the thing I get a lot, Chris, is people ask me, all right, how much did you tell them? What information did you give them? Yeah. I mean, even today, I'll do events at these open seating events with different psychics or mediums, and people still come up to me and accuse me of stacking the decks. And I would never do that. My integrity is too high. I couldn't even imagine it. But people would rather believe that than the actual other option, which is, there might be a medium in the room.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So
right.
I think what I wanted to do is, and what I'm continually doing is asking the questions, compiling the data, really sort of continuing the dialogue, if you will, because we never will know everything. I mean, We used to think the world was flat. So we have to keep gathering evidence so that we can expand our consciousness. Otherwise, we're going to stay the same, and we can't have that.
Right. And Jen, I have some friends that still believe the earth is flat, believe it or not. I've had arguments with them.
All right. Cool.
So that's a whole other podcast.
Inviting them over. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I've been reading your book, and so the listeners know, you've broken down the chapters to different psychics and different mediums. And I love your humor style where you make these kind of like subconscious or quiet comments in the book after they state their claim of what they're getting, such like, that sounds like me, and you're getting these affirmations and you're saying, get out of here, no way, and you're actually, of course, not saying that to the psychic that's in front of you, but you're thinking that in your head. And I enjoyed that part of the book.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I don't hold anything back. It's like my inner monologue is out there for everybody to hear.
And for everybody listening, I really would tell you, go get this book, Psychics, Healers, and Mediums, because I normally, as a medium psychic myself and a paranormal investigator, I really don't read other books about other people and what they're doing. But I said, you know what? I'm going to sit down and read this. And I'm enjoying this because I'm seeing other perspectives of some of the other psychics out there. And then I recognized Echo Bodine because I know Echo Bodine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
she is amazing. I mean, her
Yeah.
the love and the warmth that comes from her is just incredible. It's like she's
Yeah.
like a walking bouquet of flowers. It's just
Totally. That's a great way to put it. That's so true.
And I was really interested, and I hope one day I get to meet as well, is this Thomas John guy. He really impressed me in this book.
Yeah, what's interesting about Thomas is that, we'll do a show together, and we've got a stretch of shows coming up in Chicago. We're going to Three Oaks, Michigan together on, this next Friday. I mean, we're doing a bunch of stuff together. I still like doing shows with Thomas because he is very impressive and he hears something so clearly. His clairaudience is really on fire. But he went through a phase where he was really wondering what it all meant and doubting his gifts and, 22 and going to bars and hanging around the wrong crowd. And, he wrote a bad check and has a mugshot because of it.
Right.
And all of that happened over a decade ago. And people will still today, I mean, we'll see all these emails come in from people saying, well, I thought it was real. And then I found out what happened to him when he was 22. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I did some stuff when I'm 17 that I'm not exactly proud of,
Exactly.
but it doesn't mean that today, at this stage in my life, that's who I am today. I mean, we need to talk about who we are today. And the moment that Thomas decided to embrace his gifts full force and wholeheartedly is when they got more powerful and when he accepted that this is who he is and this is what it's going on. And he had the gift since he was 4 years old, but it's just getting stronger and stronger. And then Michael Bodine, as you mentioned, Echo, Michael is her brother, her younger brother. He actually lost his gift for a while because his ego got so, front and center. He thought, well, I'm untouchable here. And so he's doing an interview just like this in Minnesota. And he went to go read the guy, and by golly, nothing came through. Nothing. So that wasn't fun for him. And the voice that was giving him all the right answers was now giving him the wrong answers. And so it's really interesting to me to hear that story because he lost his gift for a year and a half because his ego was too much in charge. So you can't forget that this is a gift that's coming through you, not something of you. And that is where I see a lot of these people in this world get caught up and tangle over their own feet because they forget that it's a gift from something greater.
Right. And it's interesting because, a bunch of them, they actually state that. I mean, like Paul Selig says that, and so does Michael, dealing with when the messages are coming through, the intent has to be there. It has to be for a greater purpose. And if it's not, you're going to get misinformation, or the universe is going to, kind of put you in your place. They're going to check that ego at the door. And I know a lot of people have gone through this. I've seen people in the paranormal industry go through this. I know I went through this at one point, and it's an embarrassment. It's a slap in the face, and you even go to say to yourself, I remember saying once, God, I suck. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? I suck. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I realized it wasn't about the ability. It's always there. It's just the intent and purpose behind it and how you use it. And that's what's really the best part about this book that I'm enjoying is I'm seeing them come forward and they're stating those things where they're getting that education. They're getting the lesson from the other side as well. They don't know everything. They're just passing on the information that they're getting. And sometimes this information is also helping them, educating them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned Paul Selig. I'm interviewing him tonight in Wilmette. Yeah, he's coming to the Chicago area, and I do these events in Wilmette called Conversations with Weigel, where once a month I will interview a different person in the paranormal space, metaphysical space. Right. Most of them are authors. And so Paul, I was rereading the chapter 6 of my book about Paul because I wanted to refresh my memory. Of course, I know it pretty thoroughly having written the chapter, but gosh, I met him first a year ago, so I wanted to just brush up. And some of his stuff, I mean, it is so groundbreaking. I mean, he gets these messages, and to watch it live, Chris, it's so phenomenal. His face changes shape in the sense that he becomes the person you ask about. He became my mother. He became my son. Their tempo, their intonation. And then when he channels from his channels, giving a message from source, it's like this booming, quick super fast
Right.
voice. And it's so cool to watch. But just knowing these things, and this was like when something really hits me between the eyes, I try to state it as much as possible, that love and fear cannot coexist.
Correct.
They simply cannot. They're in a different plane, not just a different, different floor of the building. So to know that and to feel that. And so when you're judging someone else, you're judging from fear. So you can't be in a place of love.
Right.
And love is it. Love is all there is. And God is in everything. That means the things that we hate. God is in the guy who hits you in traffic. God is in the person that murders the child. God is in all of us. And of course, accepting that and allowing that is really hard. And when we get there, then we've mastered it, right?
Right.
So we come into these human bodies to try to learn these lessons, and that love and fear not coexisting, it's just, that one really hit me, because every time I go into judgment, I stop myself and I say, all right, Jen, what are you afraid of right now? Because that's all it is. You want to remove the fear. Anytime you lose your temper on somebody, it's because you're afraid. You're afraid
Right.
they're not going to like you, or you're afraid they're going to know you're full of it, or you're afraid that they're going to judge you, or who knows? They're afraid that you're going to be told that you're not enough. And that's really what it all comes down to. Am I loved? Am I accepted? Am I lovable? That's what we're all craving, acceptance and being loved. And so when we get out of the fear, then the love can come in.
I want to comment on what you said, because you brought some really good points. Is I can hear people, some mothers screaming because their child was murdered and killed. Like, how can you say God was
Right.
in that murderer, this and that? And the thing is that we have to realize is God is in everything. We're all connected. We are, Deepak Chopra says an amazing thing, and a lot of my listeners know I've said this many times, is you take an apple, you cut an apple into 1,000,000 pieces, you take that 1/1,000,000th of a piece, what is it? It's still a part of the whole. It's still a part of that apple, yet it has its own little personality, its own little facet, its own individuality, but it's still connected from the source, from that apple. We all are the same thing. We all are a part of God. God is within us. We all come from the source. The difference is that we have this free will and this influence that can be influenced by good or bad, and those challenges and lessons that come along with that free will. So it isn't God that killed that child. It is that person that somehow, some way was influenced to do that, even though it was wrong. And I think
Correct.
Yep, there you go. And the other thing you state.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, go ahead.
You talk about the love and fear. We know, we can get into the whole thing too, is, in relationships, people act certain ways out of fear, and them trying to figure themselves out and afraid to do this, afraid of that, because they don't want to get hurt. They become very protecting. I had a situation a little over a year ago where I was having this nightmare. I came out of the nightmare, and there was this big black mass that was surrounding me. So I kicked my feet up. It shot up to the ceiling. And I've seen this black mass many times before in investigations as a child growing up. But the thing that was different was I had this overwhelming sense of fear. I was so terrified that it was as if my personality and my emotions reverted back to my childhood, as if I was terrified in the dark. And I then questioned, why am I so afraid? I've seen these before. They've attacked me before. Why? And then a voice says, that is not your fear. That is the fear they are imposing on you. And then I was like, wow. Sometimes our fear is not actually our fear. It is an energy. It is a force that, no different than if it's completely sunny out and then all of a sudden it starts raining on the other side of the street. You walk on that other side of the street.
Tornado hits.
Yes. It's a part of nature. It's a part of an energy that we don't understand, that sometimes it walks through us or we walk through it. We can change our emotions. We can change that by changing our environment and changing our thoughts. So it goes into everything you're saying, is that we have to sometimes question these things that, okay, why am I afraid? I need to change that. I need to pull myself out of that. And a lot of these psychics that you mention in here, they talk about certain fear, and they talk about how the messages come forth to try to eliminate that fear and give them a little bit of peace of mind, especially in their bereavement.
Yeah, what I hate is that acronym, false evidence appearing real, of what fear is. Because guess what? Sometimes you really have a legitimate fear. If a car is coming at you in traffic, you better be afraid, And fear is okay if it's not paralyzing for long term, right? We can all get through our fear. And if we're, we do have the fight or flight response for a reason, to try to get ourselves out of stressful or fearful situations when we feel we're in danger. But it's when the fear prevents us from moving, right? From acting, from doing, from being in relationship, from going to work, from leaving the couch. That is when we have to call in the love. And a very similar experience, you talked about that darkness coming to you. I was staying in a hotel in New Hampshire, in a very haunted hotel. And I like to think, I protect myself when I go to sleep. I don't want to let in spirits, blah, blah, blah. You try to put up the light and the double-sided mirror and all those things that we do to try to protect ourselves from darkness, right? But when you're asleep, you're asleep. And sometimes, you go unconscious.
Right.
And so I woke up to a very dark feeling spirit who was pinning down my legs. It was, I couldn't move. And then my arms, and I couldn't move. And it was absolutely terrifying. And so I remembered what this friend of mine, Therese Rowley, who is an intuitive and a medium and also a CEO consultant, which is quite the combo platter.
Wow.
But she got her PhD from Kellogg here at Northwestern University, and she prefers to work with CEOs, but she's had this gift of clairvoyance and clairaudience since she was, 6 or so. But anyway, she told me that she's raised very Catholic, and she goes to Mass almost daily. I mean, she is super Catholic.
Wow.
And she says that whenever she experiences a dark energy like that, she just says, "Come, Holy Spirit," and it's like Control Alt Delete.
Yes.
It just literally
yes.
It neutralizes the air. It's like spraying air freshener when you smell something terrible. So I just sat there and I said, "Come, come, Holy Spirit, come, Holy Spirit." And then I started saying the Our Father, which I remember from my childhood. I'm not a practicing churchgoer, but I was raised Lutheran, and so basically, it immediately went away and it dissipated. And there, it was again, the fear and love cannot coexist. If you call in love when fear is looking you in the face, if you seriously think while somebody's yelling at you, "I love you, I love you, I love you." If you think that, you can put the fire out just by thinking that when they're screaming at you, because they can't handle it. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I was mad at you, and now I'm feeling, like you said, a bouquet of flowers from Echo Bodine. What do I do?
Like spirits, during a reading once for a client, Spirit said to me, "Change your emotion, you will change your reality."
That's a good one.
And people say, "Well, how do you do that?" I go, "Well, if you're in a place where you're not happy, take yourself out of that place. Go somewhere where you know it's going to affect your emotion differently. If there's something you really like to do, like a movie you've been wanting to see, a place that's always made you happy when you were growing up, whatever, go there. Your emotion will change. You have control of your thoughts." I mean, we know Napoleon Hill talked about this, one of the greatest, motivational speakers and self-help people back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He talked about controlling your thoughts.
Yes.
And then controlling those thoughts with the emotions.
But the one problem I have with controlling the thoughts is sometimes it doesn't let you feel.
Yep.
When you're feeling the pain and you're feeling the fear and you're like, "Oh, I got to get out of this." It's like, no, move through it. Feel it. Acknowledge it. Say hello to it. Embrace it. And say, I have a right to be mad today because so-and-so blew me off and I'm sad. And I'm gonna acknowledge that. And you know what, Jen, you have a right to be sad. So-and-so blew you off and you feel alone and you feel sad and you feel abandoned. But now we're going to move through, and I'm going to go and I'm going to take a walk along the lake because I know that makes me happy, and I'm going to treat myself with love and respect because I deserve it. And that's so, it's okay to change your thoughts, but you can't deny the fear and the anger that comes through. Otherwise, it'll just shoot back like a boomerang. I think it'll keep coming and coming and coming until you stop the flow and grab that boomerang and hold on to it and then put it on the floor.
Well said. I mean, that's like if you ask the question, what is love? Well, to truly know love, you have to know pain. You have to know the loss of love.
Right.
You have to know the wanting of love. And then you also have to know love.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's, some people will ask me, I'm divorced, but my ex and I are really good friends. And someone's trying to set me up right now with somebody who's never been married and never had children. And I said, not interested. Sorry. Right. Not that I think there's something wrong with that, but I want to find somebody who knows. Actually, I said I would prefer a divorced or widowed person with children because I want someone who knows how it feels to love something and have it not work out and that have gone through that disappointment and that pain, because that is somebody that I think is going to have a deeper conversation with me than someone who's never ventured into that kind of union. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying
Right.
that's where I am right now in my life. And that's why I'm not going to go to dinner with this gentleman who I'm sure is perfectly fine and wonderful and fabulous, but I'm just not going to go there right
You're
now.
not ready for that.
'Cause-
You're not ready
Yeah,
for that.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I would love to. There's so much I would love to talk to you about, and I think some other time we will, because
Hmm.
I'm getting all these things rushing to me to discuss. But
Yes.
getting back to your book, I tell you, I'm really enjoying this. I'm on the chapter with Paul, by the way, right now, and
Nice.
I
Chapter
just got
6.
him, and then Dr.
Mhm.
Judith Orloff, which I'm familiar with as well, and then of course Carolyn Miss. She had the near-death experience, right?
Carolyn did not. Judith did.
Judith
Carolyn
did.
is a
Okay.
medical intuitive, and she was minding her own business in her 30s, and all of a sudden somebody walks by her in a parking lot, and she knows why they're ill. She knows why their
Wow.
intestines are jammed, and it's like a sudden case of medical intuition. So she teamed up with Norm Shealy, who is a Harvard-trained brain surgeon, from Harvard Medical School, and if Norm can't cure somebody, he would call Carolyn and she would look at them energetically. And the two have done, 12,000 readings together over the years. So it's a pretty fascinating party trick, if you ask me.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely want to read more about her regarding this. It's amazing how, you've had the opportunity to interview, personally meet these mediums and psychics, spend time with them, see them read other people. From your viewpoint, what's the difference between a medium and a psychic? Are some of these people both?
Yes, some people can be both, but not everybody can be both. And the thing I have trouble with psychic is that garners the visual of someone with a turban on their head
Yep.
and a dead chicken around their neck,
And a crystal
and
ball.
like,
Yes.
yeah, and a crystal ball and tarot cards, and they're going to predict your future and make you buy a bunch of candles. And so I think that, to me, it should be intuitive, right? An intuitive is somebody who gets hits on things and might possibly see some things that are your destiny points. I mean, I believe, like you mentioned earlier, free will is a very powerful thing. So a psychic might say, oh, I see it going to Jamaica. And guess what? We have the opportunity to change that to the Caribbean
Mm-hmm.
with one phone call. And so we're not going to Jamaica anymore. Now we're going to go to Europe. And so with that free will of being able to pick up the phone and make it sharp left or a sharp right here and there, stay in a relationship, don't stay in a relationship, stay at a job, don't stay in a job. I have a hard time with the word psychic and predicting someone's future, because I truly think we can chart our own future with our free will.
Correct.
However, I do think there are some destiny points that we are meant to hit at some point in our life. And I have been fascinated recently with people who've had near-death experiences, people who've died and lived to talk about it. And one of them is, Dr. Mary Neal, who wrote the best-selling book To Heaven and Back.
Mm-hmm.
And she's an orthopedic surgeon. She had a near-death experience. She was dead for 30 minutes. She had no oxygen. Okay, she knows she's a living miracle because she's a medical doctor. And when she was in the light, she was told a lot of things. But, one of the things that she said is that we have these destiny points where we're supposed to do certain things in our lives, which is, maybe have this child and marry this person or have this career. And because of our free will, they could come at various points. And so the timing might be off, but what is supposed to happen to you is something that we, I guess, chart out like a syllabus before we go to college. We pick our courses. And so that always seemed more fascinating to me. So that's what an intuitive might pick up on, those kinds of things, or what you're thinking about, or what you want to be doing, or what you're struggling with. A medium is just someone who wants to talk to the other side and can tap into, your loved ones on the other side, either through evidence of pictures. Sometimes, they work with all of the clairs: clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient, claircognizant. I'm sure I'm a clairvoyant. I'm sure I'm missing a clair or two, but you know what I'm talking about. So they use all their senses like that, and talk to your medium, talk to your dead loved ones. And some people will be like, well, what's the point? They're dead. And the point is this: if you're paralyzed in grief, and it helps you to hear that your child who passed away suddenly is not only at peace, but watching over you, guiding you, giving you signs and signals throughout the day, that can be a very soothing, wonderful thing. And Dr. Mary Neal was told when she was in the light that her son was going to die before his 19th birthday. At the time, he was 5 or something. I mean, what? Imagine having to go through the next 13 years thinking that her son wasn't going to live a long life. And that is exactly what happened. And she says, look, I know where he is. I know what, quote, death is. It's unconditional love. And they're right in the next room. It's like they're just over the bridge.
Right.
And it's closer than we can ever know. So for her, she sits in that peace and that knowing that she knows where he is. So there really is no death, so to say. The spirit does live on. And because she's had that proof, she can sit in that and know that and be comforted by that.
Absolutely. Do you feel that anyone that can be psychic?
Well, I think that anyone can develop it, right? But some of us are born with a stronger hit than others. So, example being Michael Jordan. He's amazing at basketball.
Right.
I suck at basketball. I could sit there and try to practice and maybe get a few baskets in, but I'm never going to be able to slam dunk, and I'm never going to be as graceful as Michael Jordan. Same with piano. I love piano. I'm never going to be Mozart, but I might be able to play a couple of tunes pretty well. I'm not going to be composing symphonies, and some people might just play chopsticks, but everyone can lift up their finger and play a note.
Right.
So for being a psychic, some people are born with it on all cylinders, and then it's just a matter of working that muscle and developing it and keeping it tuned. And some people are never going to get there, but you cannot run a marathon without trying to run a few miles first. So I just tell people to try to build up that muscle every day. Little exercises you can do are just simple, like when the phone buzzes, instead of looking down, just think of that first thing that hits you and see if you're right. Just keep pushing that muscle, push that button, see if it works. Yes, everyone can do it, but not everyone's going to have the same level of talent about it.
You talk about pushing that muscle, going even a little bit further, which obviously is an increase of awareness. And the more you become aware, the more you grow, and the more you develop. Are you familiar with the flower of life?
It sounds really familiar.
The flower
like with yoga?
Well, yoga's borrowed certain symbols and stuff from that as well, but the flower of life is an ancient symbol from many different cultures. And whenever you get a chance, look it up, because I feel it would be very, very interesting
it's like a lotus.
to you. Yes. And
yeah, I've seen that.
You might want to have someone on your show in the future that's an expert on that to go into detail.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is when we look at the consciousness and the evolution of the soul and the spirit, as well as within this life, how people are able to access more things on the other side by becoming more aware, is this symbol represents that. When we have a complete circle, you've learned everything within that circle, you go to the very far corner edge of the circle, and then all of a sudden another circle starts to develop, because you're just going outside that paradigm to experience more things. And then when you've done with that, you go to another part, and it expands and expands, and it's limitless. It just keeps going on and on and on. And when we talk about individuals that are psychic, why some may be more in tune than others, it has a lot to do where they are within this flower of life.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Thank you for that.
How do healers claim a place in this community?
Well, healers have a very important role, and to me that's somebody who's tapping into source not for getting messages, but through healing energy with their hands. And maybe some messages will come through while they're working on somebody. I've worked with many people who do Qigong and Reiki and reflexology and massage, and yet they get incredible messages. I interviewed a woman named Dina Chase Moore, who is a massage therapist, and when she would work on her clients, she would get these clear messages about their past lives and start telling them to them, and they would all have serious relevance and be very helpful. So I have been a Reiki master since 1999.
Really?
I took all the classes. Yeah, and I really kind of just did it on friends and family, but it was never anything that I was going to hang a shingle about. And I did Reiki on my loved ones who had to go through cancer treatments, and it seemed to help with the radiation side effects and so forth. But the real thing is that recently I've just decided to sort of bring it back. And I went and got a table, and I've got some clients that I've worked on, and I do reflexology, massage, and Reiki, all three of them kind of together. And I do this now because it's really interesting to see how it's developed within me. So what happens for those who are listening who practice Reiki or any energy healing work, sometimes you feel heat coming from your hands. And for me, my hands will turn on when I am in service, right? When I am ready to go. And so if my hands are super hot and I'm working on somebody, then I've realized lately, as I get quiet and I ask, help me serve, help me do this, it's very soothing for the person on the table.
Right.
I mean, they just feel calm. I mean, everybody feels better when you're getting your feet rubbed or your neck rubbed or your shoulder rubbed. And it's that contact of healing intent, right? It's that relaxing. I mean, if you ever had a massage by somebody who's talking to you the whole time and they're stressed out, you basically absorb all of their gunk. And it's horrible.
Yep.
It's not enjoyable at all. But that person that just emanates joy and healing, you can't wait to get on their table because you just want some of that to rub off on you. And so I think they have a very important place. And somebody like, a Carolyn Mace who can then look at you and say, you're blocked and your pain is a result of heartbreak and you need to let go and surrender and stop judging, your ex for all the pain that was caused in this divorce. You got to let it go. It's not condoning what they did. It's taking you out of the torture of recycling all of that baggage and thinking about it over and over and over again and reliving the injuries that happened to you emotionally. Just let it go. And so by having somebody reflect that back to you, I think it's very important. So I think healers have a really important part in all of this as well, because just like mediums and psychics, they work differently and they have different talents and different gifts. I just met a healer in St. Louis over the weekend who is from Guatemala, and she did stuff that I was like, whoa, what's going on? She was doing cranial sacral on my head, and then, let's get a psychic surgery on your third vertebrae. And wait, I'm like, what? But all I know is I left there feeling 10 feet taller.
Really?
It was really cool. So I'm always interested in experiencing other modalities that I have not experienced before, just to see how people work.
Where's Carolyn out of? Where does she reside?
She's in Chicago.
She's
in
in
the Chicago area.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she is. She lives in Oak Park.
I got to get a hold of her. Okay. I'm ready.
Yeah, you do. She's fabulous. Anatomy of the Spirit came out 25 years ago, and that was the first book that really kind of rocked my world. And it's really a good read, and it's powerful, and that helps, the reader kind of understand how this journey hit her suddenly. And she talks all about the mind, body, and spirit connection in that book. It's still just as relevant as when it came out 25 years ago. It's really great.
Have you read the book? I mean, I've been researching near-death experiences since, I think, 91, 92. And one of the first books I read was Embraced by the Light by Betty Eadie, who I had the pleasure of interviewing a couple years ago, and Daniel Brinkley, and then a couple others. There's a book, I think it's called Dying to Be Me. And
yes, that's Anita Morjani.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great read. And I interviewed Anita for my third book. She's wonderful. And I'm sure you probably remember the story. She was in a coma for however many hours, suffering from, I think she had 24 tumors from cancer, some of them the size of lemons.
Yep.
And yes, she was really a powerful story, because when she was in her coma, she was shown, that we are all connected. We are all the same. We are all one. It is all, we are all unique, and the universe needs all of us. Like snowflakes, we're going to be different. We're going to look different. We're going to feel different. We're going to think different. And that's okay. That's part of the deal. It's really amazing. I love that.
It's interesting, too, when she talks about, healing the body, how you have to focus on your thoughts, and that she came back and then she was eventually healed from this cancer, which was just incredible. And that some of our thoughts, our emotions, our burdens, and the way we perceive things builds up within us, creates a dis-ease that causes disease and causes a lot of the things. And I know it's hard for a lot of people to fathom that, and I can understand, because, when you get these physical impairments, it's hard to believe it's just caused by thoughts. But it's a really interesting concept, and it's, it goes to prayer and everything else, where you get a bunch of people together, and in many cases, people have been healed from prayer.
Yeah, I think that was so awesome of Anita to talk about that. She realized all of her cancer was caused by all of her fears. And, so some of it, I believe, is environmental sometimes, right? If we live in an area where there's lead in the water, then that's going to impact us, right? However, a lot of us have been exposed to secondhand smoke, and not everyone's going to get lung cancer from it. So there is a piece of this where our emotional well-being can have a result, it can result in some illness if we don't have, happiness, if we are in grief, if we are negative. And so the vibration is lower, as we talked about, with fear and anxiety. And so that's not going to help you keep a healing vibration. And so if you are environmentally exposed to things that aren't great, I interviewed this guy named Vincent Jenna, who is a therapist, and he came into his gifts later in life, kind of hit him by the side of the head. And he talked on the stage when I interviewed him about how all illness is is something that you've agreed to and through your belief system. And a few people in the audience just gasped. And he said, I don't believe that anything is an accident. I think that it's all brought on by your thoughts and your fears so that you can work through it and decide if you're going to work through it. And a lady raised her hand, and she had a small child who had a brain cancer. And, it's like that goes to the bigger issues of there are some angels that come into this world that aren't going to last very long,
right,
but they are here to teach us incredible things. And as a result of that illness, we all learn about compassion and healing. I think that's what part of the journey with my father, who died of a brain tumor at the age of 56, so that he could help me dig deeper into all of this and what does it mean. And it's, life is more important than your resume and the awards that you win. It's about the relationships that you nurture. And so yes, I do believe there is a lot attached. And that's what Carolyn Mace focuses on too, the whole mind, body, spirit connection. And Andrew Weil's been talking about this for a long, long time as well.
Right.
You got to get a clear mental head, and it will really help you stay in harmony if you start with harmony. And while we can be exposed to things that are not harmonious or healthy, it's easier to fend it off when you're in a state of grace.
Yeah. When you have people like this, mediums, psychics,
mm-hmm.
healers,
mm-hmm.
and, they all believe and they're all helping people, and people are coming
mm-hmm.
out of this, being helped, being healed. You have
mm-hmm.
the other fraction, such as the religious community, that believes
mm-hmm.
this is the devil's work, that it's fraud, that it's evil spirits. How do you explain that?
Well, I think information is power. And so I'm really glad that I have all this information about parts of the Bible that talk about mediumship. I mean, the whole Bible is talking to angels, believing in angels, getting guidance from angels, having them fight your wars and join you for dinner, and getting guidance from them left and right and here and there. And, I have a Roman Catholic priest, I write about this in my introduction, who told me that, there's instances in the Bible where they're going to mediums for guidance on fighting wars or not fighting wars, and with Saul and Samuel and such. So people who say that actually, I think, are not reading the Bible, apparently. Right. I mean, and hello, what's the resurrection? Talking from the dead. Thank you very much.
Right.
So if 250 plus million people believe that Jesus can talk from the dead, how can that be the only circumstance? It's all throughout the Bible. And so whenever I encounter that, I know that they're talking about the instances where they're talking about the gypsies and the seers and putting that above God. And all of the mediums and psychics I've talked to agree with that. You should never put anything above your relationship to the divine or source, be it, a psychic or a healer or a medium or even Jesus, because Jesus being part of God, I mean, I believe that he was trying to empower us to find our God within, and greater gifts than these you will have, greater things than this you will do. So it all comes back to the God within and our relationship to God. And it's when you put things above that, like a psychic or a healer or a gypsy or whatever you want to call it, that's when people have a problem with it.
Right.
But it's misinterpretation and mistranslation. And, the Corinthians is all gifts of the Spirit. So that's what it's about. And if you want to complain about it, then I just say, go back to the Bible and call me later.
I had a wonderful conversation with Echo Bodine back in 2009 when I was in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. We sat down and I asked her, that question, how do you handle people with the religious stuff? Because I know around that time I was getting hit pretty hard with some religious people. She told me about her book, which I read, The Gift, and then I started promoting the book for her because it's such a wonderful book. I said, if I ever wanted to write a book about how to use your abilities and what's what, this would be it. So I'm not going to write it because here it is, And
right.
She makes a great point in there when she talks about the religious section, with Paul from the Corinthians talking about all the gifts that would be given to us. Here's a guy that persecuted the Christians, that was persecuted verbally, Jesus, and wanted to kill anybody that believed in him. And then Jesus appeared to him, then all of a sudden gave him the Holy Spirit, and he was going around preaching all these wonderful things. And in his scriptures are some of the most important things that are in the Bible. And he talks about these abilities, that we all have these abilities or the opportunity to access that.
Yep. And that's empowering when you think about it. But that was my biggest takeaway, I think, in this book, Chris, was that we give away our power.
Yeah.
to mediums, to healers, to psychics, to accountants, to our boss, to our family, to our children, to our spouse. And it's really about self-empowerment, and not a selfish way, in a self-first way, like in the put your oxygen mask on before the plane goes down kind of way. And if we could get back to that and really understand that we have the answers. I mean, every time, there are a couple of the psychics that I talked with. In fact, just this last weekend, I did an event with Thomas John, the Manhattan medium, and he was like getting these texts from a couple of friends, like, should I have this surgery? Should I get these shoes? Should I, it's like they can't even think for themselves when they're shopping for clothes. Are you kidding me? And so he just said, I think sometimes people get too dependent on this gift or what this is, and make a decision for themselves, and it's too bad. And that's where we get tangled up. That's when we lose ourselves. And if ever we need to reach outside of ourselves, I mean, sometimes we need it, Chris. Like somebody has to tell you if you have basil in your teeth, if you're not in front of a mirror, because you can't see it.
Right.
So sometimes we have to have someone tell us what's going on, and it's good to have that reflected back to you. But if you're leaning on them for everything, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think everybody listening got that mental image that sometime or another we've had either spinach, basil, or kale stuck between our teeth.
Yep, it happens.
Now, in all the years that you've been researching this as a journalist, as a reporter, and even with your own self-interest, have you encountered any frauds in your research?
I haven't necessarily quote unquote frauds. There are a couple of storefront psychics that I've been through over the years where you literally walk in off the street in New York or in Chicago and they've got the glowing sign outside, and the first thing they try to do is get you to try to invest in, a $500 candle that will burn away the negative energy, and that's just a bunch of hooey. Right. So there's that. But what I've found is that sometimes somebody who's really highly recommended to me, who has the pedigree, so to speak, and the best-selling books, didn't necessarily resonate with me. I think it's sort of like getting a doctor recommendation. You have to see how the chemistry is with you and that other person to know if there's going to be a connection made, And so I have, there's a healer in Chicago that I just adore. Her name is Gigi Belser, Belser, and she's fascinating. And we met in Reiki class back in 1999, and she is now just gone through the master's program. She's doing quantum empathic healing that I can't even understand, but I just know I feel better after I talk to her. And so I sent a couple people to her. They didn't have the same experience, but 80% of the people I do send to her have an incredible experience. So you just never know who's going to resonate for somebody and who's going to have a bad day. That's the other thing. Sometimes, as you know from doing this work, there are days when you're working better than others. Right. There are certain days when you're super tapped in. Same with me in the Reiki. There are some days where it takes me 10 minutes for my hands to turn on. And I'm like, hello, guys, what's the deal? I've got someone on the table now. Can we get started, please? So you just don't know. There are so many circumstances, from chemistry to turning on your chakras to all the above.
There is. And I know there's times where I didn't get any sleep all night. I'm sick and I got a reading that I have to do and I want to cancel it. And I'm like, this is not going to go well. And all these spirits line up and it just goes wonderful. And I'm like, wow. Right. And they keep telling me, Chris, it's not about you. It's about the message and it's about the person. So that's the frame of mind I've adopted over the years and evolved into, that no matter what, it's the message. So it doesn't matter if I'm healthy, if I'm sick, if I'm not feeling well, it doesn't matter. If there's a message that has to go through, it has to be delivered.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, too. Like, the people that are supposed to be there will show up. I find often when someone cancels, not because of a scheduling conflict or whatever, or they just cancel, maybe they're not ready yet for the healing. Maybe their soul isn't ready, and that's okay, too. You probably have that happen for you. People will cancel, and it's like, well, they must not be ready to hear the message yet. They wouldn't absorb it fully if they came today, so they'll do it another day.
And it's the same question as when someone says, hey, should I get a reading with you? And I'm like, you're asking me if you should get a reading with me? I said, what I tell people, I said, if you really feel that you're drawn to get a reading, then get a reading. If you're just trying to do it for entertainment, don't do it, because I don't do entertainment. Right. That people are brought to me for a specific reason, or I'm brought to somebody. Even if I'm in public, I may go up to a complete stranger and say, hey, I have to tell you something. Might sound crazy, but here it is. See you later. Nice meeting you. Got to go. Has your research changed whether or not you believe in God, a creator?
Oh, I always believed there was something more. I always believed in a creator. My research has only deepened my faith that there's more going on, as I would, have expected it to, really. Because at the end of the day, like I said, my takeaway from this book was that I found that my intuition kicked in ways I didn't think it could. And so if we all could take that time to get quiet and go for it, we could really find that there's a lot more going on than we can see or know or ever understand.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's deepened for me.
So are you like a true believer now that you've written this book and you've gone down this journey?
Of some people, absolutely. I mean, I don't ever claim to have all the answers, but I certainly think there's definitely something going on. I mean, you mentioned Paul Selig. He has this clip that I just saw recently on his website from
Okay.
a story they did on him for Nightline, for
Oh, wow.
ABC. And this cracked me up because, first of all, being, a journalist and having worked at CBS, ABC, NBC, all those guys, to see how they package a channeler like Paul Selig, who's a psychic and an intuitive. I was like, how are they going to make this sellable to the mainstream, right?
Right.
How are they going to do this? Well, they called him the love psychic. Like,
Oh,
give me
boy.
a break. That is
Yeah.
so not what he does, but they had to put some sort of label on it, some sort
Right.
of hook, some sort of something. And I was just laughing my head off. I was like, oh my gosh, this is hysterical. And they showed him reading a producer and reading, Sammy Hagar is a big believer in what he does. And they interviewed the Hagars and Sammy's wife and all this fun stuff. So it was a really cool package to watch and see Paul be celebrated on Nightline. But the way that the media had to package it was to call him the love psychic, which is just so unfortunate. But that's how the news media rolls.
Right.
They've got to come up with a headline and a hook that's going to draw in the viewers.
Right.
So, if Nightline is doing a piece on a channel like Paul Selig, then I think that there's hope that more mainstream media will start covering it on a regular basis because the interest is there and the proof is there. And the proof being that we can't explain how these people know what they know. And that's what's so fascinating to me, to watch that journey unfold.
Is you said Paul's coming in, you're going to be interviewing. Is he going to be performing at all in Chicago?
Yeah, so he is doing a workshop in Chicago over the weekend. And he's just agreed to, in fact, I just read the email right before our call. He's going to do channeling for the room. He's going to basically deliver what the room needs to hear, which I can't wait to hear, because he says, I never know what it's going to be. I just stand up and open up and, my mouth starts moving.
Right. Yeah, I'm very familiar with channeling and having been introduced to it back in the 90s, and then I've gone through situations where I've channeled as well. So it's fascinating
Mm-hmm.
how the spirit can go
Right.
through, and I'm familiar with Seth, from the
Oh,
70s,
sure.
and then
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Hicks and all of them.
Yeah.
So
Yep. And the Hicks, they're doing something in June. They do it seasonally. I mean, that's the other thing. Thousands and thousands of people are going and listening to these channeled messages. And again, it's great that we need somebody to sit there and tell us these things. And if that helps us hear it better, then cool. But I believe we could all channel. I believe we
Right.
could all go and get quiet, and whether it's when we go for a run or whether it's when we go and sit on a rock at the beach, however, whatever it takes, however we can get there, we should try to find what it is within us that helps us get there.
Yeah, it's that connection. It's that meditation that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to receive that information.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: Is you wrote the book "Stay Tuned: Conversations with Dad from the Other Side," and I didn't know this until I did a little research on you last night. But there's a couple things I want to share with you. Is I met your father a long time ago, and
Mm-hmm.
he was a sportscaster, and
Mm-hmm.
my father played professional hockey 13 years in the NHL, and he played for the Chicago Blackhawks in the '61 when they won the Cup. My dad's Reggie Fleming.
Who is your father?
Reggie
Oh my
Fleming.
God. Of course. Okay, gotcha. That's
So
funny. I'm
I
sorry I didn't make that connection.
no,
That's
and I
awesome.
may even have met you a long time ago. I'm not sure, but I am familiar with your work. I'm familiar hearing you on
Mm-hmm.
the radio. I remember Danny Bonaducci show, everything,
Oh, sure.
and your name always came up in
Mm-hmm.
conversations, as well as, of course, your father. So
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting. Like, oh my God, yes, I definitely want to do this. And what intrigued me was you had written the book, which I'm going to be ordering because I want to read it. I'm actually writing a book about my father who passed in 2009. and it's called
Mm-hmm.
Hey Dad, I Love You. And there is a reason why there's that title. But
Mm-hmm.
my dad and I always talked about, death, because he had a stroke and a heart attack. And for 5 years, he was in Claremont in Buffalo Grove. He was
Mm-hmm.
semi-paralyzed. So we talked about everything. And the one promise
Right.
we made that, I tried to educate him what it was like on the other side to communicate with me. And on the day he died,
Mm-hmm.
he did communicate with me. And it's incredible what occurred. So I was intrigued by reading your book to see what your experience was. But what I'd like to offer to you is, in the future, is to
Mm-hmm.
get together. Have you ever heard your father's voice after he's passed?
I get little knowings, but I don't have a clear audience channel to him. No. Is that what you mean?
I mean, to actually hear his voice audio coming out of a
No.
speaker.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
What I would like to do is, I'm an authority in what's called ITC, Instrumental Trans Communication,
Mm-hmm.
and EVP radio boxes. And I introduced a spirit box that's been used all over the world that was on Ghost Adventures back in 2009. I co-created it with Gary Golka. We have been
Cool.
able to communicate with others on the other side, to have them actually speak through the device.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say maybe 60% of the time they come through. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they don't come through, but other spirits deliver messages directly from them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate that my father came through multiple times and still does. So what
Nice.
I would like to do, if you feel comfortable in the future, is sit down with you, show you the devices, and then do a session to see if your father will come through.
Oh, I'd be thrilled and honored. Thank you so much. That would be great.
No, you're very welcome. It's last night when I went to sleep, I thought about this interview today, and I remember the memory a long time ago, meeting your father, and then I felt my father come through last night and just say a few things, and I said, okay, well, Dad, I'll try, I'll offer it to her, and
Right.
my dad said he would attempt to help in this communication.
Nice. Nice. Well, my dad isn't shy. I mean, it's kind of a joke with Thomas John that he's done some spirit circles in my home before, and I'll host them. My office is downstairs, and my main area is upstairs, and so he he's basically banned me from coming anywhere near a spirit circle, because if I'm anywhere near, my dad comes barreling through like, "Hey, what everybody have for breakfast?" He's super chatty and all excited that I'm embracing this, and he'll come through any way he can because he's a mic hog.
Right.
So I am sure he will embrace whatever opportunity he can to shine again.
Yeah, obvious from what you stated. I mean, he's well aware of what you're doing and excited about it. And I'm sure him and
Yeah.
many other relatives on the other side are all talking about your journey and what you're accomplishing. Because, as like the pebble in the pond that Betty Eady talks about in her book, Embraced by the Light, what you're
Yeah.
doing is opening up a lot of other people out there. What these mediums are doing is reaching out to many people, not only giving them hope, but also giving them, strength of their faith, giving them the opportunity to receive those messages that are really needed, really needed.
I completely agree. Completely. And when I get an email, and I'm sure you feel this way too, when you get an email of somebody who's had an experience that really helped them, it just feels so, because you never know as a writer if your words resonate for others until they tell you. You just
Right.
don't. You put the words out there, and then it's like, okay, I'm throwing that one into the wind and I'm hoping for the best. But it's just not something that's an immediate gratification type of thing. And so to get those emails from people, just got a text yesterday from someone who said that chapter 8, Carolyn Mace, was their favorite chapter, and they highlighted so many things. The whole chapter's like yellow. And I just thought, oh my gosh, you're kidding. And that's a testament to Carolyn and her wisdom, right? So then I
Right.
texted Carolyn and said, and I forwarded the text to Carolyn, and Carolyn, wow, hey, who knew? Glad to know it's still sticking after 25 years. It's just great. And we don't know how each encounter is going to help others. And you can't do it with that intent, right? You can't do it from an ego place. You just do it from a service place. And then that's when the flowers bloom.
You mentioned in the book here, as well, some of the other mediums talking about truth. and there's no lies on the other side. It just doesn't even vibrate. They don't even think of it. Is the truths that come through here resonate with certain individuals? And it's those truths that attach to them that they need at that particular time in their life that resonates. And that's wonderful.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, too, is that I just rereading the Paul Selig chapter today, I'm sure I'm in a different place now than when I handed in that chapter several months ago, right? So for me to absorb it again from a different place was so beneficial. So his words are continuing to help me grow even months after the first conversation took place, which is how it all is. Some people pick up the Bible and they grab it and they read it, and it hits them. A verse will hit them in just the way that they need it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember who it was that I interviewed, but she said, gosh, who was it? She said, you know what? Sometimes it might just be one sentence of a book that you need. And that's it. You don't have to think that the entire book is going to resonate for you. But that one sentence might be just what you needed that moment, that day, and that's why it was worth it.
Isn't it amazing how that happens? And it also happens with music.
Yeah.
A song
right.
will come on.
Only like one track on the whole album, but that one song is what you need.
Exactly. Well, Jenniffer, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And for everybody listening, you can pick up Jen's book, Psychics, Healers, and Mediums, A Journalist, a Road Trip, and Voices from the Other Side. It's available on Amazon.com. You can check out Jen's website, www.JennWeigel.com. That's JennWeigel.com. And listeners can also contact Jen at info@JennWeigel.com. Any last words for the podcast, Jen?
You know what? Anybody, yes, I love hearing from readers. Just reach out and go on my gigs page if anybody listening is in the Chicago area. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up in the Chicago area with Thomas John in June and other things happening. There's always Echo Bodine is coming in August, actually, to the Wilmette Theater, so that'll be great. We've got Raymond Moody coming in July.
I know Raymond Moody. Yes, great guy.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff coming. So I love it when people reach out to me through the website. And thank you for doing what you do, Chris, because it's very important, and I hope you keep doing it.
No, thank you. I do. It's my path. You talk about the bridge, and that has significance. All my listeners will understand that. But I will also keep in touch with you. I'll reach out to you, and then maybe in the future here we can get some time. We can sit down, and we can see if we can connect.
Perfect. Your Chicago area?
I live in the northwest suburbs, yes.
Fantastic. Easier than we knew.
Well, thank you, Jen, so much. And for everybody listening, this is Chris Fleming and Jenniffer Weigel on Spirit Talk. I'll see you next month.